So, Tiny Toons Looniversity premiered today, and it was predictably bad. We'll talk about it more in just a second here. One of the biggest problems I have with Tiny Toons Looniversity is it is another example of this continued attempt to take old franchises and modernize them for a quote-unquote modern audience that doesn't actually exist. This is another example of a show that spends most of its time trying to be relevant to a current-day audience that won't exist in 20, 30, however many years. The original show, Tiny Toon Adventures, is at least 33 years old now. It's been around for that long, and that's a long time for a TV show. It hasn't really been rebroadcast much since maybe the early 2000s, but there are people who remember it. There are people who know what it is. I did an entire Toony Talk review on it, and I thought it was a great series, but I think the number one thing it was bogged down by was its constant references to very specific things in that time period. And when you do that, when you make that many cultural references, you date your show. I know they were just trying to make something that was fun and culturally relevant and young. The whole idea of Tiny Toon Adventures was sort of Looney Tunes for a next generation. But this show is Tiny Toons for a new generation. So it's taking something that's already established and trying to redo it. And I don't think that they succeed. I think the recharacterizations are bad. I think the comedy is bad. I think the overall writing and scenarios are bad. I think the animation is bad. I think the voice acting is bad. I didn't enjoy any of this. I really didn't. And I saw the first two episodes. I stuck with it. After the first one, I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a mess. But I stuck with it till the second episode, and the second episode just made me want to not watch it even more. I didn't have a good time with this. And I was also struggling because I was really looking intently at who this would appeal to. Because classic Tiny Toon fans aren't going to like this. They're not going to relate to this, even if it's made by people who remember classic Tiny Toons. There's no actual honoring of the classic show, not really anyway. Most of the characters are completely new and completely unrecognizable. Babs and Buster are twins. Plucky is just a butthole. Hampton is basically Porky now. They just made him into a younger Porky, and Sweetie Bird is a completely new character. You know, she existed in the Tiny Toons, but she was just basically a more modern Tweety Bird. That there wasn't much differentiating. She was a lot louder than Tweety, or possibly a reference to older Tweety with her being pink and all that, but in this she's just a completely different and completely new character, and she gets more screen time. I don't know what the decision was behind that. She ends up being Babs's roommate because the Looniversity is set up like a boarding school where they all have dormitories that they stay in, and that's one of the big plot lines of the first episode. The first episode is actually up on YouTube if you want to watch it and make your own decisions, but I'm just going to go ahead and warn you, I don't think it inspires any further viewing. I thought it was very dull, very uninspired, very predictable, not very funny. And the original Tiny Toons wasn't always laugh out loud funny either. There were a lot of moments that weren't funny, but it was thoroughly entertaining throughout, regardless of the comedic value. This doesn't even have that to fall back on. The entertainment value just simply isn't there. This is a show that is just trying to be like everything else of this age. It's not trying to differentiate itself in any way, shape, or form, despite the fact that it's got the strength of the Looney Tunes license behind it and the Looney Tunes characters behind it. Now, we haven't been introduced to all of the classical Looney Tunes characters. Eventually, we're going to see Lola Bunny, and we're probably going to see Sylvester and Tweety, and we've seen Yosemite Sam, but we're probably going to see Elmer Fudd and some of the other classical characters. I have no doubt they're going to film more classical Looney Tunes in this than they did in the original, but I don't even care, and I'm a massive classical Looney Tunes fan. I can't stand the new Tiny Toons. It looks like most of the classical characters are going to be sidelined and background characters, aside from the 5 trio that you see on the screen right now. They seem to be the standard focus. I thought they were going to give Babs a third roommate, and maybe they still will. I was surprised Fifi LaFume got a few lines in the second episode, so there's hope that maybe they'll give her something to do, but most of the other characters just look like they're in the background, and that's that. They're just background fodder. That's what they were for the first 2 episodes. Just to remind you, hey, they're there, they exist. There was no sign of Elmira, Duff, or Montana Max, whether you love or hate those characters, and I I'm okay with Max. I can't stand Elmira, so I'm good with no more Elmira. She's a one-note annoying character. I never really liked her as a kid, and I don't like her as an adult. I think she's just a dull, dumb character. So whether she's here or not, I mean, it'd be nice for the sake of being an homage to the classic to have everybody back, but it looks like they're not devoted to that. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe they're just doing an episode-by-episode reveal. I have no idea. Like I said, Fifi LaFume got lines in, and we also saw Shirley the Loon, who they made... It's amazing that they even changed her character. It really is. I don't know why. It's amazing that she's still the sort of psychic, she can astral project and all that stuff, but they gave her glasses for reasons unknown. I don't know. But what I do know is it seems like these other characters are just gonna kind of be there for the sake of plot. They're not going to be central figures in really anything like they were in the old ones. So I don't know. There's not a whole lot that inspires confidence in this. There really isn't. Buster and Plucky hate each other, and Hampton has to keep them from hating each other. So it's going to be a constant stream of will they be friends or will they not be friends? Will they eventually be friends by the end of the season or by the end of the series? Who honestly knows? But they're being presented as rivals and angry at each other all the time, and that's annoying, you know? This is just the writers trying to constantly mix things up for the sake of mixing things up and making sure that stuff doesn't get stale. And I understand that, but again, that's not what their relationship was in the classic show. Their relationship was far more wholesome. Yes, Plucky was a bit of a self-centered, egotistical jerk, but he, at the end of the day, still cared for his friends. He did. He was actually better than Daffy in that regard. In the classic cartoons, Daffy showed no regard for Bugs. He just basically used him all the time. So he was a better friend than Daffy, but he was very similar to Daffy. He even said in the show several times, Daffy is my mentor. He's my icon. You know, and he is Daffy's younger counterpart. You know, the other aspect of this is the marketing. They didn't really market this thing, so when they drop it, people, again, unless you're my age or older, you don't really remember this show. You know, I caught this show in reruns mostly in the late 90s, early 2000s. It premiered in 1990. I was born in 92, so, you know, you do the math. I wasn't exactly around for its original run, but there are people who were, and they're in their 40s and 50s now, whereas I'm in my 30s. So who exactly is this for? Because Gen Z isn't going to know what this is, because the show wasn't reran for them, ever, that I can recount. You know, this show was reran mostly, like I said, in the early 2000s, when those kids were basically just infants. So who is this for? And it's one of the reasons why they just completely rebooted it instead of just basically making it a continuation of what's established. The one thing that they seem to be doing that I do like is they are zeroing in on the aspect of this is going to be about classic Looney Tunes characters mentoring a younger generation. I think that that's fine. The original show kind of dropped the ball on that premise. They started out doing that, and then it just kind of devolved into them having their own adventures anyway. So it was like, what's the point of them learning these gags when they already seem to know them and are using them in the story? That was a gripe I had with the original Tiny Toon Adventures, was there was no reason for the mentor relationship. It didn't need to be there. And so to me, I look at that and I go, this is an improvement, but who knows if they're going to take it seriously in this either. It just appears to be more of a central focus than it was. And that's still not enough to save the show, in my opinion. I think the show is overall a very weak experience. I don't think that it's something that's truly worth watching long term, because I think the season is going to be very predictable. I think the only people who are going to get any enjoyment out of this are really, really young kids, and it seems to be targeted towards middle/high schoolers. I don't see, you know, this being targeted towards people my age who remember the original series, because everything is so radically different. It really is. So this isn't Tiny Toons to me, whereas the Animaniacs reboot, despite not liking it, it at least felt like Animaniacs. They tried to make it feel like Animaniacs, like a natural continuation years later. And I guess that's harder to do with Tiny Toons. None of the original voice cast is back, which I'm sure a lot of people who maybe researched this show knew, but I mean, this is just a complete start from scratch, and that can work, but I think they did it wrong. I don't think it landed. I think it's just going to be, hey, remember that Tiny Toons reboot from the 2020s that failed? I think that's what this is going to be. I don't think this thing is going to succeed beyond 2 seasons. Granted, I've been surprised before. A lot of trash has gotten renewals because there are people who will watch literally anything. But I don't see this thing being a success. Teen Titans Go is still going, but it's not exactly getting critical acclaim. It's just, it's captured a young audience. And that's, I think, the only hope this show has, is it can capture a younger audience who has no prior knowledge of the original. They're completely ignorant of it, and they like the bright-colored characters and some of the slapstick, and that's what they'll rely on. But the animation is stiff. You know, it's stiff and jilted and just weird. A lot of people were commenting on that when they did a preview on Instagram. There were a lot of people going... First of all, there are people who didn't even know who these characters are, which is hilarious to me. It's just Gen Zers and the younger half of the millennials who are like, wait, who are these characters? They have no idea because, again, Tiny Toons was basically shelved after, I want to say, like 2006. And it wasn't really put on any other services or physical media. It just was buried. Animaniacs still got attention, but Tiny Toons was basically lost to time. It was only remembered by people who had watched it through those reruns and the original run back in the 90s, the early 90s. And I think that was because of all the cultural references, or because of some rights issues with Amblin and Warner Brothers. Because this was co-produced by Amblin, and I believe that this one is also co-produced by Amblin, or they have the rights to the Tiny Toons characters and they're just licensing it out to Warner Brothers, which is actually very possible. Either way, Amblin's name is attached to this. Steven Spielberg is executive producer, but he wasn't the original too, and that doesn't mean anything. That just means, hey, Amblin is involved with this show. He probably doesn't even have to set foot at Warner Brothers Animation. He just has to just thumb it up or thumb it down. And I think that's what he did with Animaniacs as well. So, I mean, honestly, who knows? I'm not privy to a lot of the behind the scenes of this show, nor do I particularly care, because what the final product isn't very good. It just isn't. I don't like any of the voice acting. I don't like any of the characterizations. I don't even like the animation slapstick. There's really nothing here. There's nothing here. I don't know who this is particularly for. I can't figure it out. Maybe you know in the comments. Hey, maybe you liked it. That's fair enough if you did. I'm not going to blame you for liking it just because I didn't, but I really don't think this is worth your time if you are a classical Looney Tunes fan, or if you like any of the Looney Tunes spin-offs, including Tiny Toons and Animaniacs and all of that. I really think that this is a show for nobody but the people who made it, and for the writers. And we see a lot of this coming out of Cartoon Network, unfortunately. They don't make shows for broad audiences anymore. They either make them for easily captured target demographics, or they make it for themselves. And I think this is an example of a show that has been made for the writers and animators and so on. I don't think this is a show for anybody else. It doesn't have that appeal. And you can say I'm wrong about that, you can say you disagree, but at the end of the day, I don't see the appeal, and I'm not probably going to stick with this show. I don't have any reason to. Some people might say, well, it's just 2 episodes. They could completely change the tone, the characterizations. I don't think the rest of the season is enough time to do that. And I don't see this going beyond 2 seasons. I see this thing as fading into obscurity. Cartoon Network doesn't have a good track record with new shows. Adult Swim is different, but Cartoon Network doesn't have a good track record with new shows. They just kind of air them and then they play them on repeat. They don't do any new seasons because they don't get the traction. They just don't at the end of the day. They're still showing World of Gumball, whatever it's called. And I think that's a terrible show. I tried watching it one time. I laughed maybe twice. It's just high energy, Zoomer style nonsense. It really is. It doesn't have any timelessness to it. It doesn't feel like it has any sort of broad appeal. Like, why would you watch these shows with your kids? It just doesn't make any sense. I sound like an old man. Back in my day, I mean, you could watch stuff with your kids. You could watch shows like SpongeBob and Fairly Odd Parents, and over on Cartoon Network you could watch Dexter's Lab and Ed, Edd and Eddy, and there were references for adults and kids. It was a mixed audience show. It was technically a kids and family show, but it was mixed because they knew more people shared living rooms, more people shared, and that's part of the thing, is people don't share living rooms anymore. Everybody has their own device that they watch on, so they don't need to make shows that appeal to everybody anymore, so they can dumb down humor to focus on a specific generation. And part of it is older people trying to relate to younger people and failing miserably. And that's a lot of what this show tends to present itself as, at least so far with these first 2 episodes. And it doesn't work. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. A lot of scenes look like they're just trying to create memes. They know about meme culture, and they're just trying to see if they can make it into meme culture. Which pretty much anything can, so I don't know why they're trying so hard, but regardless, they are. This is a show that just doesn't have any appeal. I don't see the mass appeal to anybody. That's my biggest takeaway. It's predictably bad. It's ideological out the wazoo. Even if it's not overly preachy about it, it's still there. It's still underpinning what they're doing here. And you're going to get all sorts of throwaway lines. We got one from Sweetie Bird in the first episode where she talked about not liking injustice. It was a very quick throwaway line, but it's there. It's absolutely there, and it was eye-roll inducing. Thankfully, the rest of the episode was not all about that. It was just something that they couldn't resist putting in. And that's what you're starting to see. So, unfortunately, this thing was a dud, and I called it. I went into it with no expectations. I said in my original Tiny Toons review, I'm pretty sure I said, it's going to be bad. I have no good expectations, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I did. And I think it's terrible. So let me know what you think of this show. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Super Koopa TV with another edition of Toony Talk. I will see you guys next time. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.